from West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting, good morning. I'm Beth Voorhees. We're here to bring you live coverage of a public hearing from the House chamber at the state capitol in Charleston. This one is about Senate Bill 423 to amend the Aboveground Storage Tank Act to address and correct certain unintended consequences of the original enactment. The program is now focused on tanks with a capacity of 10,000 gallons or more within zones of critical concern of public water utilities. Some background. On January 9th, one day after the 2014 session began, a coal cleaning chemical called MCHM leaked from a tank along the Elk River in Charleston and contaminated the drinking water for 300,000 people in 9 counties in the Kanawha Valley with a do not use ban for up to 10 days. Governor Tomlin promised never again, and that event became the focus of last year's legislative session. So the legislature passed Senate Bill 373, regulating above-ground storage tanks. After the bill passed, the DEP then set about registering every above-ground storage tank in the state. Well, the DEP decided in a rule to focus on those tanks near public water intakes, not all above-ground storage tanks in the state. So this is what this public hearing is about. We all remember a year ago and how shaken the Kanawha Valley was about the water crisis, as it was called, and Senate Bill 373 was to be the solution to that problem. Now we come back with Senate Bill 423 to amend that piece of legislation. This public hearing is being put on by the committee that is the bill has been passed by the Senate and has been referred probably to the either government organization or judiciary committee in the House, and so the House will now take up this bill. Someone asked that a public hearing be held on Senate Bill 423 so all the arguments for and against the bill could be spoken about before the House committee and before they take up Senate Bill 423. It is a cold morning here after yesterday's snowstorm. Roads are still not in great shape, though interstates are in pretty good shape. Secondary roads are not in great shape. So I don't know if that holds back the number of people that will be attending this public hearing. Yesterday, in the midst of the snowstorm, there was good attendance for the Senate bill having to do with the West Virginia Firearms Act. So we'll see what the committee learns about this issue during this public hearing. If you'd like to join in the conversation, you can email us at feedback@wvpublic.org. Follow us on Twitter at wvpublicnews, or find us on facebook.com wvpublic. You can also follow along on Twitter using the hashtag WVLEGIS, WVLEGIS. That's the hashtag that people use at the legislature on Twitter. The House has held several public hearings through this session. They're very well coordinated and organized. What happens is people who want to speak either for or against the bill will go up to the table there. There's the press tables in the front of the room there. And there is a sign-up sheet for the bill, and there's a sign-up sheet against the bill, and you put your name on whichever side you want to speak on. And then that list is given to the committee chair who runs the public hearing. And the committee chair simply calls the name of a person to speak, and he staggers them both for and against. And he'll call one name and then call another name so that the person can come to the podium and the other person is on deck, so to speak, and ready to go to the podium so that things flow along very smoothly. Most public hearings last 1 hour. We are waiting for the staff of the House that runs the audio system to give us some audio here. Just want to make sure that you know this is, there's no problem with your set, there's no problem with your audio. It's just that the House is silent right now because no microphones are on. There isn't a microphone, what we call an ambient microphone, that would just be on all the time to let you kind of hear what's going on the floor. It has to be the microphone at the clerk's desk that has to be turned on. And I don't see the committee chair at that podium yet, so they're not ready to start. So don't be alarmed. It is just silent in the House right now. As soon as they turn on that system, they will begin the public hearing and we're good to go. So for now, just please stand by. Just once again, we are standing by to watch this public hearing that will begin shortly, we hope. We have to start airing on time, but they don't have to start on time. We have to start at 8:30. They don't necessarily have to start right at 8:30. So we just want to let you know that we are here and we will be bringing you this public hearing on Senate Bill 423 to amend the Aboveground Storage Tank Act. You can follow along on Twitter, hashtag WVLEGIS, WVLegis. And we will begin when they begin. Again, stand by. We just saw Delegate John Schott, the chair of the Judiciary Committee in the House, enter the House chamber. So they must be close and ready to begin. Once again, this is a public hearing about Senate Bill 423 to amend the Aboveground Storage Tank Act to address and correct certain unintended consequences of the original enactment that was Senate Bill 373 last year. The program is now focused on tanks with a capacity of 10,000 gallons or more within zones of critical concern of public water utilities. We'll hear more details about this bill during the course of this public hearing and how people feel about it, for or against it. I can tell you now that West Virginia Public Broadcasting is bringing back final night coverage. For those of you who have missed it, the final night we've not produced in some years now. But thanks to this new technology of cameras in the Senate and House chambers, we can now bring you live coverage of the final day. So West Virginia Public Broadcasting, we will be here on March 14th at 11 a.m. and follow the House and Senate on that final day until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we will take a break and we will be back with final night coverage at 8 o'clock until the gavels fall at midnight. That's on the final day of this legislative session, Saturday, March 14th. We hope you can join us. We'll be telling you more about that over the next week. But final night is back on West Virginia Public Broadcasting. We're almost ready to begin the public hearing on Senate Bill 423, tank regulations. As soon as they turn on microphones and begin, we'll have full coverage of everything that's said here before the House Judiciary Committee.
Best I can, and I hope I don't offend anyone. We'll begin with Linda Sodero, followed by Larry Williams.
My name is Linda Sodero, and I live in South Charleston. I've operated a small business in Charleston since 1992, and my husband is the president of a small family business that his father started on the west side of Charleston in 1951. What we learned from the January 2014 chemical spill into the Elk is that without clean water, the economy stops. Life as we know it stops. For weeks after the spill, my clients canceled one after another because people who can't shower don't want to come for massage therapy. The economy did not immediately recover either. 5 months after the spill, my husband was forced to let go an employee, a family member, in order to keep his business afloat. This was a traumatic and singular event in our family's 63-year history of serving this community. If you want to see how important water is, look at this drought monitor map. We don't exist in a vacuum. I believe that small businesses matter in West Virginia, and that is why I came here today to say that rollback of protections for our water is wrong and bad for the future of small business. Amend Senate Bill 423 to restore strong water protections. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sodero. Larry Williams, followed by Lori Magana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. West Virginia has a citizens legislature, of which I am one. I operate a small family business in Preston County with my grandson.
What?
He's became a part of the business. We'll be in the 4th generation. Part of our business is retail sales of heating and motor fuels. Above ground tanks used for the retail sales range from 2,000 to 4,000 gallon. None of these products mix with water. Many years ago, tanks were put above ground for several reasons. With proper and I emphasize proper secondary containment. Any time of the day, it is easy to see and smell if a leak is occurring. We are regulated when we put these tanks, above tanks in by FAR Commission, Tier 2 reports, EPA, DEP. Small businesses cannot stand a fee increase that would take the profit of from 1 to 3 months of selling a product each year, depending on the zone you are in. No common sense there, especially as a product, when a product does not even mix with water. Let us allow for common sense to be applied to this tank bill and apply regulations based on the product. Proper secondary containment is important, and over the years, it's very apparent to me.
Excuse me, Delegate Williams, will you wrap up your remarks, please?
Yes. With that, I'll be around for the next week or two for any question. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Williams. Lori Magana, followed by, and I'm sorry, I can't read this. It looks like F-E-R-Q, Ferk? Ferg or Ferk?
Hello, I'm Lori Magana, and I live here in Charleston, West Virginia. I was one of the many citizens who stood here last year speaking at a public hearing in these same exact chambers requesting that our legislators protect our water by passing Senate Bill 373. We celebrated when it was passed and our governor signed it into law. Unbelievably, I am here again asking that you safeguard our water, the most precious of commodities. When I learned that new bills were being introduced to this current legislative session to weaken the Above-Ground Storage Tank Act, I had a very visceral response. I got sick, I felt lost, I started crying, I wondered what was happening to my state of West Virginia, a state I love and I want to live in. Last year, many hoped that by passing the Above-Ground Storage Tank Act, that West Virginia could potentially be a role model for other states by having some of the cleanest water in the United States. If you scale back our water protections and pass Senate Bill 423 without amendments, I now know that will never happen. I also thought I could live happily ever after here in my state of West Virginia, but if you scale back our water protections and pass Senate Bill 423 without amendments, I now know that that will never happen. I urge you to vote to amend the Act, the Senate Bill 423, to include stringent and explicit standards on tank and secondary containment. I, along with Ava, Emmy, and Alex, ask you to protect our water. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Magana. Is it Ferg? Yeah, followed by Benjamin Sullivan.
Upon this World Prayer Day, God bless Earth. People, lend me your ear. God-fearing brothers and sisters, allot the attention. Republic officials of a tainted, rotten, and polluted deception of vote. There is a shame made upon our area, West Virginia, so much that our unclean bodies, dried elementaries, undercarriage, has caused thee to constipate upon our mandibula, uppers. Yet I, and all whom hear me, pray tell, will come to know that God has seen the love you give as public officials. Public officials, exhortation. Yet I will come to this in the latter, that unlike the transparent fluid you took from us, allowing and plant upstream from a water treatment facility, we see through your deception that unlike the chemical compound of oxygen and water, whom come together to form hydrogen oxide, a substance that enhances life, ye accomplish an abject covalent bond between thee and thou public, making for an unstable foundation, configuration. People, brothers, sisters, what stands erect upon an unstable foundation? Ye say nothing, yet I tell thee, such a thing exists, a current, currency, circulation of money standing upon the backs of people as its foundation. Exhortation, public officials, the current water that brings us pollutant, contaminants, carcinogen, death, pray tell, gave by water baptism to fornication. Do not allow coeptus of the malignant mind and currency, lust, forsake thou body, a newest and novus standing, or have your children, or any children, babies, women, men, to partake bad spirits of dysentery. Therefore, Senate Bill 423 must protect the public people. Exhortation, safety of life means nothing for these public officials perceive the rock of Horeb.
Excuse me, sir, you need to wrap up your comments, please.
Yes, sir. Whose physical body's location is in Zen, striking the public, causing chaos, execution by a lack of hydration, along with other forms of water use, instead of being a leader who can take the public which ye represent out of the wilderness of Zin. Speak to have water that will not kill thy brothers. For bad spirits inhabit thee, to allow the exemption of tank water.
Excuse me, sir, you're using up other people's time now. You've used up 2 minutes now, so you need to be finished.
Let me say this one thing. One point.
One sentence.
Public affiliates. If ye have made I'll just let you guys read it later.
Thank you. If you have, by the way, anybody has written comments that they wish for the committee to consider, please file them with the clerk after you speak.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you. Right here.
Enough time. I know there's other people who do it later. There's enough time.
No, you're finished. Benjamin Sullivan, followed by Bill Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ben Sullivan. I'm Associate General Counsel with Energy Corporation of America. ECA was born in Glenville, West Virginia more than 50 years ago, and we have a couple hundred employees in this state, including more than 100 in the Kanawha Valley. So we lived through the Freedom Industries tank spill last year. And in fact, I, like ECA, was born and raised in this great state, and I'm raising my family here in the Kanawha Valley as well. And we understand as much as anyone here the need for clean water. I understand it, our employees who are here understand it. It's important to us, and it's important to business. It's important for jobs to get new recruits to come into this state to have clean water. But being in the oil and gas industry, we also know that our industry's tanks are already very heavily regulated on the state and federal level. We know that our tanks are small. We know that our tanks, many of which contain only brine water, which is salt water. We also know that most of our tanks are far away from water intakes and other public water supplies. And we know that without the changes proposed under the existing Senate Bill 423, that many in our industry, including many here today, small producers, will go out of business with excessive fees that don't offer any appreciable increase in protection to the public water supply.
Excuse me, Mr. Sullivan, would you please wrap up your
Yes,
comments?
sir. So I'm here today to ask that the House support Senate Bill 423, which is a tough compromise between jobs and protection to the water supply. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Bill Price, followed by Carrie Virginia Grace.
Thank you. I come today with one simple talking point. Vote no on SB 423. I do that as someone who for most of my life lived in an area where water that came into my home came from one water intake, my private well. That water was as precious to me as any municipal water in this state, and this bill does nothing to speak to that. Much has been said about unintended consequences, as if last year's bill was a knee-jerk reaction. But that last year's bill went through multiple legislative committees, was passed by both houses of the legislature, signed by the governor, and then turned to the DEP where there was a rulemaking process with public input, with public hearings. There's nothing knee-jerk about last year's bill. It's only been in effect for a year. Give it a chance to work before you start messing with it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Price. Carrie Virginia Grace, followed by, please keep the outburst down. Carrie Virginia Grace, followed by Rebecca Randolph.
My name is Carrie Jo Grace. I'm a citizen of Charleston, West Virginia. Public health and safety should always be the state's top priority, and Senate Bill 373 enacted last year was a major step towards protecting citizens. We worry about jobs, but what kinds of businesses would want to locate in a state where the right to clean, safe drinking water is superseded by the so-called right of industry to put people and other businesses at risk? by the right of out-of-state corporations to squeeze every cent they can from West Virginia, by the right of economically volatile extractive industries to short-term profit at the expense of thousands of others who are the backbone of our business community and citizenry. We should give the law that was passed last year time to go into full effect. Because of the bold action of the 2014 legislature, we finally know where all the storage tanks in the state are, what they hold, and the condition that they are in. This part of the law has worked well, so let's not change it unless problems appear. Vote no on Senate Bill 423, and I have written statements from 4 other people that also speak to that.
Thank you, Ms. Grace. Rebecca Randolph, followed by Paul Dalzell.
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Randolph. I'm the president of the West Virginia Manufacturers Association. Manufacturers in West Virginia provide over 48,000 direct jobs with average annual compensation of $70,000. Our association is proud to have served the interests of manufacturers for 100 years and looks forward to the bright future of industry in this state. I'm here today in support of Senate Bill 423. We appreciate the opportunity the WVMA was provided in working with bill sponsors, Senate Judiciary leadership, and a broad representation of stakeholders, including the West Virginia DEP, the environmental, and the regulated communities, to develop an approach to this regulation that is reasonable and efficient. Senate Bill 423 adopts the concept of zones of critical concern as developed in the House of Delegates last year and adds additional protection through the addition of zones of peripheral concern. As was intended, this new iteration of the legislation works to focus the efforts of the DEP on tanks that present the most risk to public drinking water supplies. Let me repeat, this legislation protects drinking water. Standards for tank integrity can now be incorporated into existing permits or plans, and the bill provides the DEP the authority they believe is necessary to adequately enforce tank standards. In addition, Senate Bill 423 requires registration of all above-ground storage tanks, allows the DEP to maintain a consistent inventory of all tanks, maintains language from Senate Bill 373 regarding noncompliance, financial assurance, corrective action, as well as the Secretary's ability to inspect.
Ms. Randolph, please wrap up your comments.
Our member companies have a strong commitment to safe and environmentally responsible practices, and with that, we urge the passage of Senate Bill 423. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Randolph. Paul Dalzell, followed by Karen Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Dalzell. I'm a member of Advocates for a Safe Water System, which is a group that formed after the chemical spill last year to protect the water system here in the Kanawha Valley and the 299,000 of my closest friends. We've learned a lot about water systems in the last year. A lot of people have in this nation. In this area. We've learned about what it takes to protect them. We've learned a lot about how the government works. We've learned about influence and gathering people behind a common cause. We have the businessmen of Freedom Industries to thank for that. I know more now about water systems than I ever thought I would, and that one of the most important aspects of a water system is protecting the source water. That's one of the 5 elements that it takes. I learned that when catastrophe hits, people working together can and will make a change. Do you remember what that was like? Do you remember last year and how it felt to make change happen? Do you remember how it felt to protect your family, your friends, your neighbors? Senate Bill 373, passed last year, was the right thing to do, and it is a good law. It went through several committees. It was passed by both houses. The rulemaking process in the DEP got plenty of people, both sides, to work on it. It was a compromise.
Excuse me, Mr. Dalzell, please wrap up your comments.
Yes, sir. Please do not let special interest groups influence you to repeal it and replace it with Senate Bill 423. Protect our water. I strongly encourage this committee to not pass 423, let it die, and let Senate Bill 373 do what it was designed to do, keep the people safe. Thank you.
Karen Ireland, followed by Timothy Byrd. And while Miss Ireland's coming to the podium, just the members of the audience, you may notice that a number of the delegates and staff have been fighting off all kinds of maladies. And so it might be a good idea to take advantage of the hand sanitizers you'll find all over the Capitol and the restrooms and thereabouts when you leave. We'd hate for you to carry out what we've got here to deal with. Miss Ireland?
I'm Karen Ireland. It's funny that you say that because last winter I had started a new job and I was desperately afraid of getting sick and having to take time off work. But I did get sick. I got sick in January after a long hot shower. It was a cold winter, and I took a hot shower thinking it would warm me up, and immediately became sick and was sick for 2 days. And that was the day before that I had heard about the chemical leak. And I believe, though I can't prove, that I was sick from exposure to MCHM. I've been called an environmental activist, and that amuses me because I just barely recycle, and I need to change out my incandescent bulbs. You can ask my son, he's always telling me to do that. What I am is a person who drinks water, and I bathe in water, and I encourage my kids to drink water instead of pop. And I became involved last year with the process that 373 was going through. I want to say that that bill was a compromise. The rulemaking process took care of any kind of unintended consequence. The DEP's risk-based approach means that water tanks aren't going to be regulated, tanks out in the middle of nowhere aren't going to have to be inspected. There's just a lot. You know, we hear brine. Brine contains heavy metals sometimes. Ask DEP. It's not just salt water. So I ask you to really pay careful attention to what you're doing, and I'd like to see 423 die. Barring that, amend it to keep strong water protections in place. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Ireland. Sherry Talk, followed by Timothy Byrd.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Timothy Byrd. I am the plant manager of the DuPont Bell plant. I lived in West Virginia for 17 years, went away to corporate for a few years, and now I'm back to be here for the rest of my career, to retire in the state of West Virginia. I raised my family here. I have children here. I have grandchildren here in the area. I truly appreciate the opportunity to speak in support of Senate Bill 423 on behalf of DuPont. At the Bell plant alone, our company employs over 700 people who live here in the Kanawha Valley with their families. As members of the community, our employees and our company are committed to responsible practices when it comes to the issues of safety, health, and the environment. Toward that ongoing priority, we continue to invest in our plant operations, and we hired more than 450 West Virginians in the last 3 years. Senate Bill 423 provides the necessary and improved framework for the regulation and enforcement of above-ground storage tank standards, and ultimately the protection of the environment, including the protection of the drinking water supplies. Senate Bill 423 maintains the concepts of zones of critical concern as developed in the House of Delegates last year, and adds additional protection through the zones of peripheral concerns. The bill maintains many components of Senate Bill 373 while providing a greater focus on tanks that present the most risk to drinking water. In addition, Senate Bill 423 provides an efficient means for regulated industry to incorporate West Virginia's newly developed tank standards into existing plans and permits.
Excuse me, Mr. Byrd, please wrap up your comments.
Thank you. My request is that the House Judiciary Committee immediately take up consideration of Senate Bill 423 and that the committee pass Senate Bill 423 as transmitted from the Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. Sherry Talk, followed by Paul Sheridan.
Thank you for some time to make my comments this morning. I am a newer resident of Charleston, and based on that, I was not living here a year ago when people were experiencing the negative impacts of the contamination. So I didn't experience the lack of water, the nausea, the vomiting, the skin rashes. But what I do know is that water is one of our most valuable resources. And as a newer resident of Charleston, that concerns me. After reading this bill, I am more focused on the actual specifics of the bill. And the concern I have is how the determination was made for the areas of concern. 1,000 feet, 5,000 feet, or the mathematical formula that was used to determine where water was going to flow. What is the accuracy of that? Because that is really what matters most. If it's not 99.9% accurate, then it's not stringent enough. So I would ask you to consider, if you know for a fact that it's going to be stringent enough to ensure that that contamination could not happen. And I would add to that, if it is, then how is it that Freedom Industry tanks that contaminated the water a year ago are not included in those areas of concern? So based on that, I urge you to consider this bill and vote no for everyone's safety and protection of our water here in West Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tulk. Paul Sheridan, followed by Jonathan Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Sheridan. I'm counsel for Advocates for a Safe Water System. Last year's water crisis was an especially dark time, and one reason was because it was such a preventable event. It occurred because in the past, public health and safety has been at the very bottom of the priority list. Last year, in the wake of the water crisis, this body and the Senate enacted into law Senate Bill 373, which was a sign of hope in the midst of the water crisis, in the wake of the water crisis, in large part because it strongly suggested that there had been a change in the priorities and that health and safety the public health and safety was being considered a significant and important priority. Senate Bill 423 is not a fix to something that is broken. 373 was good legislation, as others have mentioned. It was a compromise bill. It went through many committees, and there was a long process that went into it. It has not had a chance to work. This is not an attempt to fix something that is broken. It is, I fear, a reversion to an old set of priorities which we should put behind us. So I would urge you to reject Senate Bill 423 in its current form. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sheridan. Jonathan Race, followed by Mike Plant.
Good morning. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm Jonathan Race, Responsible Care Leader for Dow's West Virginia operations. I have oversight responsibility for the health, safety, and environmental compliance of our facilities here in the Kanawha Valley. My role supports Dow's dedication to be a good neighbor in ensuring our responsible operations within our community. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in support of Senate Bill 423 on behalf of Dow's nearly 900 employees and contractors who live and work in the Kanawha Valley. I also had the distinct opportunity to oversee Dow's work in compliance with last year's Senate Bill 373 and want to share with you why I support Senate Bill 423 with my experience in implementing last year's bill. First, I agree that strong and quick action was required by the legislature last year to address community concerns and restore the public trust. However, the speed of the bill also resulted in some unintentional consequences and implementation challenges. Some examples of these I want to share with you. First, some unclear requirements on exactly what tanks, ancillary equipment is included and not included in the program, questions on inspection scope, frequency, inspection qualification, and industry standards with which these should occur, and regulatory and reporting redundancy the law has with other state and federal regulations. Now, the West Virginia DEP has worked hard to clarify the law wherever they could and put permanent fixes needed to but permanent fixes are needed to provide clarity for industry to enable compliance action in consistent and effective manner with the law. Senate Bill 423 addresses many of the concerns.
Mr. Race, please wrap up your comments.
You bet. And keeps high industry standards. Thus, we sorely need clarification requirements and focus on true risk mitigation to keep our waterways protected. The Senate Bill 423 provides. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Race. Mike Plant, followed by Gary Zuckett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mike Plant. I moved to West Virginia in 1992. I've made my home here, built my business here, raised a family here. Unlike a lot of people that are here today, many of whom are my friends, I'm not being paid to be here. I don't have an impressive title after my name, and I don't employ hundreds or thousands of people. Please, please, quit telling us how many jobs you create and act like we don't care. Every one of us has a job or wants a job and cares about jobs. We know you do too. Another guy named Don Blankenship told us how much he cared about jobs, and I wouldn't trust him with my children. I wouldn't trust him to work, them to work in his mines. The owners of the...
Mr. Plant, please avoid personal comments.
The owners of the Bhopal plant in India, I'm sure employed a lot of people too. But when it comes to water, we depend on you to protect us. To say that this legislation protects drinking water is to say that Colonel Sanders protects the chicken. It doesn't pass the smell test. We can do better. There are a lot of smart people in this room, and I don't pretend to have all the answers, but Senate Bill 423 is not the answer. It doesn't protect our water. It wouldn't have protected us from what happened with Freedom Industries. Please, please, please do better than this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Platt. Gary Zuckett, followed by Jim White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Gary Zuckett. I'm Executive Director of West Virginia Citizen Action. And I believe that citizens were generally outraged and disappointed at the beginning of the session when this bill, Senate Bill 423, was introduced that basically gutted the work that was done by this body last year. Of course, it's been negotiated back to partial sanity, but we would prefer to let 373 work and have it, work, give it a year to work. But if that's not going to happen, there's some major work that needs to be done on 423, including incorporating the DEP's risk-based rule. There's been a rule that has been developed over the last year through the stakeholder process. That's not in this bill. There are basically 1/3 of the deregulated tanks are all located within 1,000 feet of a river or stream. And I see my lights on, so I will wrap up. But please fix this bill if you're going to pass it. Thank you.
Jim White, followed by Rob Goodwin.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Jim White, Health, Environmental, and Safety Manager for Bayer Material Science, South Charleston, West Virginia. As a 60-year-plus resident of West Virginia, currently residing in Pinch, I appreciate the opportunity to speak in support of Senate Bill 423 on behalf of Bayer and its 500-plus employees, 260 who work in the Kanawha Valley. As members of the community, our employees and their families are as concerned as any member of the community in being responsible when it comes to both the manufacturing of our products and protection of the environment. Senate Bill 423 provides a necessary framework for the regulation and enforcement of above-ground storage tanks and ultimately the protection of the environment, including the protection of drinking water supplies. Senate Bill 423 maintains the concepts of zones of critical concern as developed in the House of Delegates last year and adds additional protections through zones of peripheral concern. In addition, Senate Bill 423 requires registration of all tanks, allows the DEP to maintain a comprehensive inventory of tanks, safeguards tanks' integrity. And my request is that the House Judiciary Committee immediately take up consideration of Senate Bill 423 and that the committee pass Senate Bill 423 is delivered from the Senate. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of Senate Bill 423. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Rob Goodwin, followed by Maya Nye.
Thank you. I'm Rob Goodwin with the West Virginia Environmental Council. Primary concern I have with this 423 as written is that you look back to the Freedom Spill, and one of the primary causes what allowed that to happen was poor discretion on the part of DEP. And I think everyone will understand that freedom was something that slipped through the cracks. In this current version of 423, a process is set up where a permittee is allowed to go through an alternative modification process. Full discretion is left to DEP as to whether those permit modifications are to be as stringent as the strong standards that were set out last year in Senate Bill 373. Moving forward, we may be okay for a couple years while the idea of freedom is still fresh, and DEP is still working strong. It still has the support of this legislature to do what's right. But when we think 5 years, 6 years down the road, we don't want to be back here. Let's fix this now. Let's put a clear mandate that has to go into these permit modifications, protect those tanks in the zone of critical concern, and provide at least some level of accountability to all tanks, no matter where they are. And I think we'll be in good shape. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. Maya Nye, followed by Doug Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Maya Nye, and I'm mostly a lifelong resident of the Kanawha Valley. And I'm the executive director of People Concerned About Chemical Safety here in West Virginia. And one of the reasons why is because our communities have not been adequately protected from chemical releases for basically my entire life. Chemical industry put food on my table. I also worked in the chemical industry, so I understand the importance of economic development in this state. But like I said, chemical releases have not been adequately, they haven't been adequately protected here in the Valley, particularly. Some things that I really want to highlight is that 423 does not classify tanks based on scientific data. There are a number of chemicals that are stored in the tanks that are talked about in this bill that have not even been adequately tested for human consumption. And we learned that last year. 300,000 people were the guinea pigs for that. So it seems to me that scientific data should really be in play here when we're talking about exemptions. It fails to regulate a bulk of the tanks in this valley, because I know that a number of process vessels were completely exempted from the original bill. I know 14 people who specifically left this area, them and their children, middle-aged, tax-paying citizens who left specifically because of the water crisis. So I would just ask you to take these things into consideration and to take into consideration that the Freedom tanks wouldn't even be regulated under this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Nye. Doug Douglas, followed by Nancy Ward.
Good morning. My name is Doug Douglas. I work for a small, independent, family-owned oil and gas producer in West Virginia. We are a West Virginia company with West Virginia employees that uses West Virginia water. So we cherish that just as much as anyone else. One of the major misconceptions I think that came about when the legislation passed last year that still may apply is that oil and gas tanks are not regulated. But the fact is that since 1973 under the EPA, there's been spill prevention, control, and countermeasure programs that have been in place, SPCC for short. That program focuses on adequate containment in case of breaches rather than tank integrity. Its purpose is to prevent spills from reaching waters that may cause damage or ill effects. So the purpose of this bill and last year's legislation to protect the waters is already in place with programs that oil and gas producers have to follow. Look at the track record. There's not been one catastrophic incident with a water situation from an oil and gas tank with over 47,000 located in the state. I'll wrap up here. In closing, we all want to protect our water. We live here, like I said, as do the families. The sheer number of tanks in the state make it hard for DEP to regulate this, but why punish an industry that has existing standards to protect the public? We just want reasonable regulation of our industry and use of a risk-based approach with unnecessary costs. Senate Bill 423, although still burdensome, is an improvement from last year, and we ask that you seek passage of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Nancy Ward, followed by Betty Richard, I think, or Rivard.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Ward. I'm a Charleston business owner and co-founder of the West Virginia Sustainable Business Council. After 28 years in business, this Freedom Industries spill almost put us under. Some businesses did close, and others who were considering West Virginia as a place to do business decided it was just too risky to locate here. I've attended several stakeholder meetings and took part in the meetings held over the summer where the DEP, industry, and business leaders met to discuss the rules the DEP were crafting. The complaints from tank owners were being addressed in a fair and reasonable manner, and it was shown that wild rumors of huge costs for inspections were unfounded. As a business owner, there are fees and taxes that we are forced to pay. We don't like it. It hurts our bottom line. The 1% added sales tax that was added this year in the city of Charleston hurts my business, but I have to collect it. The city needs the money, and even though it's going to direct people to the internet to avoid the added expense, we have to collect it. The added expense of inspections is going to cost tank owners more money. I understand that, but it will not be overly burdensome. The fact is we need those inspections to guarantee safe, clean water for our citizens, my family, and my customers. Industry's right to do business ends when it interferes with my right to do business and when it affects my family's health. When you vote to protect business and jobs, please protect my business, my employees, and the thousands of businesses who depend on safe, clean water, to do business and attract tourists to our state. If last year's bill went too far, then this year's bill does not go far enough. As written, Senate Bill 423 does not adequately protect our water from leaking tanks.
Ms. Ward, please wrap up your comments.
Thank you. I'm asking you to vote no on Senate Bill 423. Give 373 a chance to work. Let the DEP do their job and make sure they have the funding they need to implement the rules they worked so hard to craft for Senate Bill 373. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Betty Rivard, followed by Tom Boggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Betty Rivard. I'm a resident of Braxton County, and I also have an apartment in Charleston. I just want to make 2 points. First, the water made me sick, and it still does, and it seemed and still seems like no one cares. The only side benefit that I need to admit is that it makes my hair shinier. Second, this is not a partisan issue. It's an oil and gas and coal issue. The representatives of those industries fought the law last year, and they're still fighting it. The only senator who voted against gutting it this year is a Republican. The 3 Democrats who represent my district are all leading the charge to protect oil and gas instead of protecting my friends and neighbors and me. I can't understand why they think that's okay. It is not what I voted for them to do, and I don't believe that my neighbors would support that either. The DEP is able to accommodate oil and gas and other interests within the law and proposed regulations, and they need.
That's all the time we have because the hearing began 15 minutes late. We cannot bring it to you in its entirety. You can go to the West Virginia Legislature's website, click on House Streaming Chamber, House Chamber, and you can watch it there. Full coverage of this public hearing and all legislative news and information on the legislature today at 6:30 on West Virginia Public Broadcasting. We've learned there will be a joint session of the legislature at 10:30 today to receive a storm update from state emergency officials. But again, on the legislature today at 6:30, we'll have a full report about this hearing. I'm Beth Voorhees. Thanks for joining us and good morning.
We feel that 423 is an improvement to last year's bill, the above-ground storage tank, and should be supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boggs. Lyda Shepherd, followed by Rick Wilson. I'll ask our presenters to please, when you see that light come on, please wrap up your comments right when it comes on. Okay. Yours is not on yet, though. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. I have to say it's feeling a little bit like Groundhog Day, not talking about the weather. My name is Lyda Shepherd. I'm with the American Friends Service Committee, and I'm here actually to share some remarks from Destiny Gallagher from Drawdy in Boone County. She was here at this very podium last year in the public hearing when we were considering how we're going to protect our water. And so I'm here to read her remarks because she's now 16 years old, and but she couldn't be here this morning, so I'm here to share what she says. When I first had heard about these rollbacks to water protection laws, I was deeply upset. Last year, we United worked extremely hard to get these protection laws in effect, and now here we are again. How could our legislature for 1 minute even think about putting what companies want before the safety of West Virginians? Clean water is essential for businesses, for raising a family, and for the natural beauty of streams and rivers here in West Virginia. Also, I had a thought, wouldn't more inspections create jobs, and shouldn't almost every law we consider create jobs, and at the very least keep people safe? Don't you want to, and finally, I'll skip to the end. Finally, what are lawmakers expecting of me and the next generation? Don't you want to leave us with clean water so we can raise our family here and make West Virginia more prosperous and sustainable for years to come? Please oppose Senate Bill 423. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. Rick Wilson, followed by Jeff Eisner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Due to weather, a lot of people couldn't be here today. I've been asked to read a statement from the League of Women Voters, of which I am not a member. According to the League of Women Voters supported Senate Bill 373 because it made every effort to protect the waters of our state from another above-ground storage tank spill. They urged the legislature not to weaken SB 373 protections. SB 423, under its current form, exempts far too many tanks from regulation, many of which are located within 1,000 feet of a river or stream. While many tanks don't need to be regulated, they believe that the DEP rules should be the basis of any amendments. Certainly tanks that failed last year's inspection should be included in the regulatory procedures. The League also supports annual inspections of those tanks near water intakes. One of the lessons from last year's spill was that water utilities need to prepare plans both to prevent disasters and respond. SB 373 included provisions for such planning. We must ensure water utilities and disaster response agencies have the information they need on stored chemicals in the above ground tanks. I'll hand over the rest of the statement.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Tim Sayer, followed by Jeff Eisner.
I was born and raised in West Virginia, and I have children and grandchildren that live in this state. Do you even remember what it was like this time last year? I was scared to death to eat out anywhere, even wash my hands when I went to Charleston. I have a friend who lost a baby about this time, and another who was still suffering rashes and burning in his eyes when he showered. I lived in St. Albans at the time, and my grandbabies were in Point Pleasant, so they were safe. I opened my home to all my friends so they could come over and bathe and get drinking water. It was a mess, but we pulled together and we got through. We also passed a law that would help make sure it doesn't happen again. And now you want to gut this law and exempt over 36,000 tanks. This is unacceptable. I will not allow it, and like it or not, you work for me. I am representing all of the citizens who cannot be here today to tell you these things. They don't all just live right down the street like I do, and they can't all just show up in the aftermath of a snowstorm and a flood of epic proportions. So I am here for them. We didn't trust you then, and we sure as heck don't trust you now. I don't know why we bother to pass laws to protect the environment in West Virginia anymore. You just allow them to be circumvented whenever the money comes from the right people, or even better,